The only way that Putin and his team were ever going to win militarily in Ukraine is if the fantastic support from the West stopped. He is starting to sense weakness here, especially as the presidential election starts to move towards 2024. I mention America, because if they pull out, I am pretty sure support will fall like a house of cards around the poor Ukrainian people. Here's looking at you, Olaf Scholz. But let's stick with the Americans for now. The two strongest Republican candidates have both stated their lack of commitment to supporting Ukraine going forward, with one even stating that he would carve the country up for peace. Now the makeup and importance of these two is unimportant, their intentions however couldn't be clearer and more significant. What's more, this could dictate the flow of the race, which means support could start to dwindle, as candidates begin to double down on their lack of support, with each one trying to outdo the other to appeal to the more radical Republican base. This will speed up the withdrawal of support as even Biden begins to feel the heat and Republican members of Congress fight for their prospective candidates and seek to upset any transfers Biden may be planning. Here's looking at you, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. It's pointless getting into the question of why these candidates are so hell-bent on turning their backs on Ukraine, only that they will. I genuinely believe that the isolationist policies of at least one of them will see the diminishing of America on the world stage. Let's be clear, the world is starting to operate just fine without Russian oil and gas. I feel sure that they will find a way to operate without America too eventually. In terms of old Joe, he doesn't have another term in him. The man is old, mentally weak, and frankly frail. I wish this wasn't so, but the greatest and wealthiest country in the world gave their citizens a grandpa and an orange criminal in waiting as their two presidential hopefuls. The grandpa won because people went with an anyone but Trump vote. But really, if this was the best America could offer, and Joe seems hell-bent on running in 2024, then America and the world is getting set up for another bout of amateur hour. But maybe it won't even take that long before things go sour. Because after more than a year into the war, the differences are growing between Washington and Kiev on war aims, and more importantly on how, and when, the conflict will end. It also seems to stem from the fact Biden and his team don't have a clear policy objective on how Ukraine will win this war. I get the feeling that currently they are giving Ukraine just enough to survive and not enough to win. Yes, before I am strung up, America is leading the way in terms of weapons deliveries and monetary assistance, but let's all be honest, they could end this in a heartbeat if the desire was truly there. As an example, the 31 promised Abrams are still nowhere to be seen. Now I realize that in terms of maintenance and training, this is not a straightforward situation. But we are talking about the world's greatest military superpower, and it cannot get 1 battalion of tanks ready for action. Yes, I realize that they need to have their armor replaced, training take place, etc., but I reiterate, the world's greatest superpower, coupled with a Ukrainian group of technicians and soldiers hell-bent on keeping their country alive, are you seriously telling me you couldn't make this happen yet? What's more, latest reports say these tanks may only be available in the start of 2024. Then of course there is the question of numbers. 31? Let's keep in mind, the US has access to an estimated 8,000 of these beasts. I realize that not all are operational, but hey, we are only talking about, yes you guessed, the world's greatest military superpower. Now I know they are not the same machine, but there are already Leopard 2s in Ukraine. So, where there is a will, there is a way. The same applies to the F-16 or Fighting Falcons. There are 3,000 of these machines in service with various nations. I have no doubt that a squadron could be formed incredibly quickly, especially from those countries currently replacing their F-16s with F-35s. Yet here we stand with nothing having been agreed. The F-16s are even easier than the tanks, because there are a limited number of fighter pilots in Ukraine. But before I cut America off at the knees, none of the Western nations supporting Ukraine have yet offered advanced fighters to this country. The only possible reason must be a perceived threat of further escalation. The only way I see this war escalating is through nuclear means, and I highly doubt Putin will do that based on a few fighters and some more tanks. Let's not forget there is an arrest warrant for Putin. He is now effectively persona non grata around the world. That's an escalation if I ever saw one. Remember, this man is a dictator, and he will see this as a personal affront to his safety and position as head of the country. But yes, America's military support has been good, perhaps even excellent. But there is an undeniable hesitancy that I just cannot figure out. In fairness, the same could be said for Europe, but they could never hope to pop the Putin pimple as fast or effectively as the US. So here is a question for you, the viewer. Please tell me, why is there this hesitancy that only seeks to prolong this horrible war? Why hasn't Putin been squashed yet? There are other cracks in the relationship that require mentioning. One of the biggest was the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. When that blew, I knew exactly who had done it. Of course, it was the Ukrainians. It was a strategic imperative that it go. Whilst giving to Ukraine, those same Western European countries were guzzling Russian gas as fast as they could, thereby paying for the Russian war effort. What a shameful debacle that was. When the US intelligence agencies concluded that it was a pro-Ukrainian group that did the sabotage, the White House unofficially voiced their anger with Kyiv that no further out-of-border attacks occur. The Pentagon officially declared that Kyiv knew nothing of the attack. What bollocks, of course they did. They must have, it was a viable target. Then of course there is Bakhmut. Each day of the city's defense allows us to gain time to prepare reserves and prepare for future offensive operations, said Colonel General Oleksandr Syrsky, the commander of Ukraine's ground forces. In contrast to that quote, you have this one. I certainly don't want to discount the tremendous work that the Ukrainian soldiers and leaders have put into defending Bakhmut, but I think it's more of a symbolic value than it is a strategic and operational value, said Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The American consensus is that the Ukrainians are expending too much manpower on Bakhmut. On this occasion I am split. I completely understand what Syrsky is saying, but I do believe there are better defensive positions to the west and that perhaps the time has come. What I do know is that unofficially the Ukrainians would have been pressured to leave the town, and by refusing to do so, they may have angered or irritated their American counterparts. Then of course there is the report that the Pentagon refused to share evidence of Russian war crimes with the International Criminal Court. Now given the level of destruction inflicted upon Ukraine and its people, this wouldn't have sat well, especially with what we now know occurred at places like Bucha etc. I can only assume they refused to do this to protect their own position as not having recognized the ICC. In conclusion, this year and the next will be pivotal to how the relationship between the US and Ukraine develops. If Russia can outlast the American will, it could be a major problem for the Ukrainians. What nobody realizes is that the Ukrainian people will use sticks and stones before they give up their freedom.
Слава Україні!
Please drop a like and subscribe, or better yet, leave a comment. Thank you for watching.